Welcome back to the Dopesick Show. You won't get sick of. I'm Spencer, and this is Sasha. Spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9th, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got a lot about the crazy stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, this story messes me up. I've had to tell it a couple of times. Because, I don't get upset a whole lot thinking about a lot of the people I was close to that have died because there have been so many of them, 44. And that's not acquaintances. If you do that, then probably back close to 200. But this one, it wasn't right. So, okay, when I was, before I was 18, I got sent to this juvenile rehab, in Florida. And this dude ended up getting sent there, and he was from Virginia too. Now he showed up there, and since we were both from Virginia, we ended up being friends. It's kind of like being locked up, to be honest. Like, people clicked up with where they're from and everything else. Actually, I can't say it's nothing like being locked up. They had girls too, and we were in the same cabin, and there was this doorway that was open, and sometimes, they'd flash and everything else. So, I mean, that part wasn't too bad, especially being, a kid. But anyhow, we ended up becoming really good friends there. Knew some of the same people, but he was from Southeast, which is like White Ghetto, Roanoke. And I learned from, pretty much his dad was on drugs, and his mom also on drugs. Two different ones though. It sounded like his dad was an opiate addict, and his mom was addicted to crack, and that his mom was a prostitute. And I'd meet her later. Weird circumstances on that. Long story short, there was an adult rehab and a kid rehab, and there were these two guys that were like 18 and 19. They were the closest in age to us, but they were in the adult program. They weren't allowed to talk to us, but they would say like smart stuff in passing, and like just tried to pluck our nerves. Okay, and I'd pick my times, when to say something back or whatever. But like he just, he was a little bit more street, just a little bit more. You say something, I'm going to get up in your face and everything else. There was an issue, something happened, and he ended up getting kicked out. So he got put back on a plane. He was sent there by probation. Okay, Virginia probation sent him to Florida to rehab. He got kicked out, so he had to go to juvenile prison in Beaumont. Sounded like it was not a good place. Beaumont, Virginia, that is, not Beaumont, Texas. And it sounds like there, from what he told me, that they didn't like people from like Roanoke and that area. Like, you were going to have a hard time from the people from Tidewater areas. Unusual. So I didn't see him for a few years. I was upset when he got kicked out. I mean, it's like my best friend. I did a drawing for him of this cross. I used to draw a lot more. It's something I quit in prison because people stand there and say, what you doing? What's this? And you can't have time, privacy, without somebody annoying you to do it. So it just got to be something that I lost whenever I went there. But I've done a cross for him, like not just, a regular cross, but all these little intricate designs with inside of it. And, I would get a phone call a few years later. And it was actually this phone call, that took me to the Ramada, and he was over there. And that was actually right when the two kids that were a couple years ahead of me in school got 10 people in my grade addicted to heroin. Got them straight on the needle. They were selling these bags that had these stamps back then. One went the whole length of the bag. It was stamped Candyman. Really wild looking stamp. And then there was another one called Black Diamond with the pink stamp. That's one that people still talk about. For 10 people to try and dope for the first time, this was very high-powered. So high-powered that people still talk about it. So yeah, they got very addicted, and the two older kids got them right on the needle. Said, oh, it's so much better to do it this way. Talked them into trying the needle. Well, he was over there. He was selling stuff, and I went over there, and we couldn't believe, we just randomly end up, meeting back up. I mean, this was like, just like those people you click with right away. I mean, this dude was like instantly best friend, And I got him out of there because I saw there was an undercover Dodge Charger at night with the lights off, but you could see the exhaust going. You could see somebody in it taking notes or something. So we got to get out of here, man. Sure enough, his dealer, who was on the second floor, got caught in the elevator with a 50-bag brick of heroin. And he didn't go to jail. But his girlfriend called us crying, saying he'd gotten caught. I guess they might have took him in for the night or whatever, but they never charged him, let him go. His dealer, who was on the third floor, got caught with 22 50-bag bricks. I mean, do the math, okay? There was a lot of stuff that happened, after that. But basically, we kind of, lost contact for a little bit because the guy who got caught in the elevator, it's obvious he told on that girl who he was getting it from. He was the only person at that hotel that was getting it from her. And he never got arrested. And she got charged. I mean, 22, that's serious. Now, we're dealing. We can't hang out with him. But he knew that guy from like when they were kids, and he wanted to hang out with them. So I quit hanging out with them because I wasn't, didn't want to get arrested. It's obvious, you know what I mean? Like, somebody's tailing, what are you going to do to hang out with them? He quit selling as much after that, but we lost weight for a good little bit after that. But anyway, talk here once. He called me. And, he called me and told me, he'd gotten cleaned up. And he was so happy to hear, and he was so proud to tell me. He was so proud to tell me he got cleaned up. Now, I'm going to backtrack, though. That's got a little ahead of myself. During the time before, he started hanging out with that dude again, and I said, I just had to get away because, he had this girlfriend. Now, he's like 18, I guess. So, 18-year-olds got 16-year-olds. I know legally you get in trouble for that, but, I mean, it was typical. I mean, you see seniors going out with, 10th graders and stuff in high school. It wasn't anything weird or anything like that. But we got this, I didn't, my mom was on that cut me off the whole way type of deal, but I was making money, so it didn't matter. So I bought a phone. I remember we bought it at Walgreens on Brambleton is where we bought it. I had it hanging up behind the counter, and he told me he knew about the phones like that. I had a phone. My mom, my mom took the phone and everything, so I didn't even have a phone. It was all the way cut off. So, it was basically sell dope in order to have a place to sleep, have food to eat, and of course have dope to do, because I was an addict. Just being real about it. But he said the Verizon phone, that's the one to get. Because after like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, until like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, free. You didn't take none of your minutes or nothing. So, got free nighttime minutes. Now, remember when we went over to that house, we had $10,000 plus between the two of us. So, 400 square foot house. He said it was his cousin. I don't think, people say they're cousins and everything. I don't think it was his cousin. And, there's 4 of us living in that little house with all money. But, I mean, we didn't have nothing. I mean, you just look at it for what it is. But he'd stay up. Now, we would do speed, but we were selling heroin. And we'd stay up. It was some wild stuff. Like, I mean, we went way into insanity on that. Like, hallucinate, full-on stuff. I remember one time I stayed up for 26 hours straight doing one drawing. It was 113 skulls coming in and out of each other's eyes, mouths, and everything else. It was an incredible drawing. But I hallucinated, little kids running around the house and everything else, and I had to ask him about it the next day, and he's like, that didn't happen, dude. Yeah, so, I mean, we were out there that much. Now, seeing as how we did that, and, we were up, this girl would argue with him the entire night, his girlfriend. But see, she wasn't on drugs. And I said, she's crazy because she ain't even on nothing. And she's going to stay up all night arguing about nothing. And she was crazy. She got people drive her over, threw all his clothes over the yard of that house. And I'm like, dude, man, I said, either she's going to get us arrested or she's going to take you out. Told him she was crazy. You know what I mean? And, yeah, she wasn't right in the head. And I didn't like her. And, he wanted me to be friends with her because I was his best friend. And, of course, that was his girlfriend. And he explained it to her one time. So I said, okay, I'll deal with her, whatever. He talked me into it, like basically begged me. Don't hate her, that messes with me. Because you're my best friend, that's my girl. And I was like, okay, and I'll try to get along with her. So I remember he was explaining to her, he just cares about, what happens, blah, 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 and this and that. And I still didn't like her. I drove him to his grandma's a few times. We hung out over there for a little bit sometimes. Just mostly for him to get stuff. Okay. And yeah. Before I was kicked out all the way from Mom's house, it was still kind of good terms with her. There was one night over there that I stayed up all night and I drew something. My mom paid me to draw a family crest. I've still got that picture that I drew. He was there that night. And that picture, it's just family crest, but it's wild because that picture was done, he was down there too. It was, it brings back memories. So, anyways, yeah, we end up losing touch. Then he calls me and he's so proud to tell me he's clean, so proud to tell me he's detached from everybody, and he's so proud to tell me in 2 weeks he's going to the Army. And when he goes to the Army, he's getting ready to go off. He's getting ready to start a life. It's going to get him some order, some discipline. It's going to give him a start to life, and it's going to be all right. And he was so happy and so proud to tell me this. And yeah. And then the next thing I see was in the newspaper was that he got killed by that girl. By his girlfriend. He broke up with her. He told me that on the phone too. He said, "Yeah, I broke up that crate with her." And I said, I said, "She's crazy, man." I said, "Something bad's going to happen. Either if you're doing bad stuff, she's going to get you arrested. Either way, something bad might happen to you. You need to stay away from her." And he did stay away from her. Okay, she lived all the way out in Catawba, which kind of close to where I live now. And he lived all the way out, in Southeast. That's a good stretch. That's like, a whole big stretch between it. She found out where he was at. And she waited for him to come outside of the house. And, try not to get upset here. And she had like a big old butcher knife. She stabbed him. And, he bled out and he died. So, she said she was trying to scare him. That was all she was trying to do. And yeah, she only got 5 years for killing him. They call it juvenile life. So juvenile life means you're locked up till you're 21 if you're under 18. They didn't charge her as an adult. Yeah, it sucked. What sucked worse was when I was in drug court. It sucked equally bad. It was so difficult for me. I was in drug court the first time, and I ended up getting sent to a rehab, public rehab. And this woman's there, and it's his mom. Me and him were like attached at the hip, everywhere we went. We were dealing, running back and forth every place for a long, long time. I never saw her. I met his dad once. We met his dad to buy a whole bunch of Oxy 40s at a really cheap price. Yeah, it's pretty much the only time we ever saw him, and that was the only reason he wanted to see him was because it was for a good deal. Never saw his mom once. His mom's in this rehab, and the whole time in this rehab, she's talking about how she'll never see him again, how this, and that, and it's just causing her so much grief, and that's why she can't quit using it, and this and that. I'm thinking about everything he told me, and I'm like, you never did see him. He told me it'd been forever since you'd seen him, and the whole time, I was always, where were you at? How are you going to be sad and have people have sympathy for you now, and act like you were, some type of mother? You weren't there. You weren't ever there. His grandma was there. That's the person who was there. She's a sweet woman. But, I had to sit and listen to that woman for the whole 28 days that I was there. And here's the kicker. In 28 days of being in that rehab, I never told her I knew her son. She still doesn't know I knew her son. She still doesn't know her son's best friend was sitting in there listening to all her lies. And, I should have put her out there. Should have, said all this stuff. But it made me freaking sick, and I had to sit in those groups, and every time, that's all she'd talk about. Maybe she regretted it after he's gone, whatever, I doubt it. I mean, from what I heard, she'd back out doing the same thing. So, yeah. But that really sucked, having to listen to her every single day. But what really sucked worse, people die of an overdose, people die of this, people die of that, whatever. He quit. He detoxed. I could hear it. You can hear it when people get off and the pride, and he's excited about life. This is somebody who, was a throwaway. You know what I mean? Juvenile prison, streets, running around gangs and all that stuff. And yeah, he was going to go into the army. He'd signed up and everything. He's scheduled to go out, ship out. And he broke up with that crazy girl, and somehow she found him. Somebody told him he's at so-and-so's house. And she sat there and she waited for him to come out. She waited, with a big old butcher knife. And then he walked out, and she popped out from around the corner and got him. She had to sneak up on him. She had to surprise him. He was built like a grown man when he was a kid. Okay, when we was in the rehab when I was like 15, big kid, big bone kid. He wasn't tall enough to be. He was about, oh my God, I'd say he was about 5'9", 5'10", about 190, 200 pounds. Just big kid, just natural. And if he'd seen her coming, he'd have knocked her out or snatched it out of her hand or something, and or whatever. So she had to have snuck up on him. I know she had to have. I know him. I know it wouldn't happen. So you sit there thinking about these things, and you wonder what ifs and all that stuff. And but one of the kickers is just to this whole thing too. I think about that, and she ended up getting 5 years. She's 16, so she spent less than 5 years probably, because she's halfway to 17. I'm sure she probably spent 4.5 years. So I allowed a drug dealer to live in my apartment, so then I wouldn't have to steal, scheme, scam, lie to my mom, or go out and steal stuff. Wasn't anything. Hey, give me drugs. I had 2 rooms in my apartment. It was an empty room. So it seemed the lesser of all evils. Ultimately, that dealer sold to somebody who overdosed and died. And they also sold to somebody who overdosed and whose life I saved. I called 911 when she wanted to drag him out in the street. And the people that were with the guy that died, his childhood friends, left him there. They ran out, allowed him to die. The guy who was a stranger to me, I met 2 days before. I did CPR mouth-to-mouth on and called 911 knowing I had warrants out. I was in hiding. The 2 guys, they didn't get any time. They got told, say Spencer gave it to them now, and they said they did. They both apologized since, but they both said, but we didn't see it. Yes, you did. Sign the papers, you're going to prison. That's what they both told me, separately. So I know that's what it is. They didn't get any time. And then this girl gets 5 years, less than 5, for stabbing him and killing him. And I get an 8-year sentence for allowing a drug dealer to live with me. Yeah, you can say the system is a little messed up. Broken, to say the least. It's not even about my thing though. It's not even about like when I say this, I'm not having any type of self-pity. It's more anger and frustration that she could say, well, I was just trying to scare him. No, you found where he was, you tracked him down, you hid around the corner, and you jumped out and you killed him. And you got a slap on the wrist for a deliberate, premeditated murder charge. How? Why? God, it's just, man. I kept it together this time. I've shot this a few times. I've recorded this a few times. It's difficult for me. It's difficult for me. That cross that I drew whenever we met back up at the Ramada, whenever one of my friends called me from his number, he said, I've got somebody here who wants to talk to you. I'm like, who? He says, hold on. And handed the phone. He's, Spencer! And I heard Chris? What? Whenever I got there, you know, he was living in that motel. You know, just living there, had his own room. All the other kids were piled up, knotted out in the other one, you know. I mean, he's just doing what he'd always done, you know. The two older kids, a couple grades ahead of us, that got all those kids doing it. He was just dealing like he'd always done, you know what I mean? He grew up tough, grew up street, so I mean, he ain't to blame for that. I mean, it is what it is. It's two older kids that called him over and say, let me show you how to do this. I'll teach you how to shoot up. It's so much better. Got him right on the needle. But I had to get out of there. I was scared of needles. And they all had needles. Some passed out the needle in their arm. I said, So we went over to Israel, and it, you know, just talked for a minute. I'm like, man, what are you doing? And you know, he said, you know, he's out here running around dealing, you know, doing this and that. And the first thing he showed me was on his arm. He had my cross tattooed on his arm, the cross that I drew for him. He kept the picture somehow, you know. And when he got out of that juvenile prison, he took that picture to a tattoo artist. And he had that cross tattooed on his arm that I drew for him. He's so happy to show me that, you know. I mean, like, it's funny because, like, this dude was a straight up street tough guy, fight somebody at drop a dime. But, like, he's your best friend on the planet if he's your best friend. And he had, like, this childlike happiness, like, proudness to show me that tattoo. Same when he called me and, you know, told me about the army, and it just sucks, you know. And not a lot bothers me. And, this one does. Shit. Yeah. A lot of people make choices, end up dying, but, you know, this one, he got everything right. And, life was gonna be good. Shit. I'm sorry. That's the end of this one.